Hi, and welcome to It's All About Jesus. And yes, this show is all about Jesus. And my name is Sheila, and I'm your host, and I'm with Freedom in Jesus Outreach Ministries. And this show is going talks about Christ throughout the show because this show is about Jesus. And I do have on a very special guest with us tonight, and his name is Gianni Tafusco. Hi, Gianni.
Hello, Sheila.
Hi, it's so great to have you on.
Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Well, I'm very honored to have you, and I'd love for you to share with me and the viewers your testimony of how you came to know Christ.
Absolutely. So at a very young age, I grew up. My father was actually an evangelist, and my mother was a women's ministry leader. And we grew up in church, like literally from the day I was born. There was nothing else I really remembered but going to church. And at that time, it was, a very just incredible time in the church. My parents were leading a region of about 500 people. This was actually what is called the arts, media, sports ministry, or sometimes arts, media, singing, that type of thing. And they led the music side of the ministry, but it was about 500 people that they led. And I remember just growing up every week, Wednesdays, Sundays, and throughout the week just going to church. And every night my parents would pray with us, and I have a younger brother, and they'd pray with us. We would just do some devotionals and stuff like that. So I grew up definitely sheltered in this kind of church world, and growing up, I didn't really have a lot of friends that were outside of this church. So at one point, in about, I think it was 2003, some politics and certain things got into the church. That's a whole another story for a different time. But at that time, a lot of pain and stuff came into the church, and again, it was around the time of also the World Trade Center and everything. So a lot of stuff happened during that time, and a lot of people got kind of hurt. And my parents eventually left the church. So growing up, when you're, again, sheltered by that whole, church environment, and you don't really know anything else but that, it's pretty intense when that kind of just gets taken away. Because I remember growing up, I was definitely called in school. I was called either the Jesus freak or stuff like that. Because there was a lot of persecution, as the Bible talks about, and my parents were always out there, kind of sharing their faith and really trying to bring people to Christ. But also, with persecution, that came some backlash. So as a kid, I didn't really understand them. I was like, yeah, I love Jesus. What do you mean? But when that got taken away, I just kind of didn't know what to do. And the same thing with my brother. It was around the age of 12, and he was about 9, 10 years old. And so what happened at the same time, the church, everything kind of got taken away there. Then also we moved from Medford to now Stoneham. So even the 2 friends that I did have in school, that even got taken away around the same time. Okay. So I went to Stoneham and really just didn't know kind of what my life was, where I was going. I played music and stuff, but I really didn't know what to do. So I started to find friends in the wrong places. And I remember, I met a few people, and I just had to kind of figure out, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my life? And that was about the time, around 13 years old, when I got introduced into marijuana. So about 13, I started smoking marijuana on a daily basis, and then it went, from a daily basis to then even before school, after school, during school, you know what I mean? It definitely took over my life very quickly. It wasn't it wasn't gradual. It was very a quick thing, and just happened. By the age of 13 then, continuing on a few years, by 14, of course, when you start to get into that world, marijuana doesn't do it as much as you want it to do it, and you start to not feel any effects anymore. So I started to go on to higher drugs. that was around 14. I started to take, pills. I started to experiment in pills and, psychedelics. And then even by the age of 15, I was using cocaine on the weekends. I would drink here and there, but it wasn't a big thing in my life. It was definitely more of the cocaine and the pills and stuff like that. By the age of 14, 15, I went to my first rehabilitation center, rehab, and I didn't go willingly. I went more because of, my parents and stuff. So at the same time, I didn't want to get clean. It wasn't like a thought in my mind to get clean. So by then, I then moved on. I got out of there, and by 16 is when I started to use opiates. And then everything else it was like, forget about it. It was opiates took over. And just as fast as the marijuana took over, it was then the opiates took over. And it just led to a really destructive path. It was even, came to the point of stealing. I was in jail a few times. Me and my friends were doing stuff, that I would never thought of doing, back beforehand. So once that happened, the pills, and again, as the same thing as the marijuana, once pills don't do enough for you, and they're very expensive, you then to lead on to other drugs, which is heroin, which is in the same opiate thing. So I became a full-blown heroin addict by around 16, 17, and around that time. And it started off, I was just kind of using that on a daily basis, but then it went to which even you think that you can't get worse than heroin, but then I led to me actually using needles to use heroin. And it just became, from there, there was no life, It was just living day by day to feel normal. It wasn't even to do it for fun. It wasn't to feel anything. It was literally just to become normal and to get through my day. And then I was also using crack cocaine, So that was about 2-3 years of that. Eventually, a church got planted here in Boston, and it was around 2012, and I met this guy. I actually went to a conference in LA, and I met this guy named Colton, which you know Colton.
Yes.
And I went to this conference, and again, I was still in this world, but I was kind of seeking out something, because I was like, I can't keep continuing to live this way, or I'm either going to die, go to jail, or be institutionalized for the rest of my life. So
Let me ask you something. What was this doing for you? Because it seems like you said you went from marijuana and then to certain types of pills, and then it led you to heroin. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So what was it that, is it a feeling that you feel, or what was it doing for you that you had to continue like with this?
At the time, I don't think I knew exactly, but when I look back now, I think it was definitely to kind of numb my emotions, my insecurities, my fears. I think I couldn't deal with emotion, and I don't blame anybody, but I think also growing up in such a sheltered environment, finally when life kind of happened at the age of 13, 12, I was like, man, I don't know how to deal with all this type of stuff. How do I kind of cope? How do I cope with losing 20 of my best friends, in kind of a swoop? How do I cope with, my parents? We've gone to church every week for literally my entire life, and now we're not going to church. There's no kind of God involved and stuff like that. So I think it was very much just to mask the pain that I was going through. At the time, I think I started out with like, oh, I'm just having fun, and it's just to be cool or be rebellious. But that quickly, diminished, and it became just this lifestyle that I never thought, I would live. Because I remember even at the age of like 10, no, not 10, or 13, I found out that my mother was, smoking cigarettes, and, I remember going in there, grabbing the cigarettes and like ripping them up because I was like, we can't do this, this type of thing. But so at that time, I never thought I would go and become who I became.
So you said that you were then led to go to a conference after all of this.
Yeah.
What happened? Did the church restart up again? That's what it sounds like.
Yes. So kind of everything happened, and then in 2012, my dad started talking about, hey, this is the church I was baptized into. They're coming out here. I want you to meet this guy. And at first, I was like, yeah, forget it, because I was so against just religion, and I was so against. I think there was a bitterness even in my heart towards God, because I felt like, why did all this stuff get taken away from me? Why is this happening? And there was a bitterness, I think, towards my family as well. Stuff that I've healed from and got over, but in that time, I think there was, because I was like, man, I was very skeptical. I was like, yeah, the church, okay, this is not gonna. I think this is just kind of for a little bit. This is not going to be something serious. But my dad, I've never seen him, because he went through his struggles as well, after leaving and just kind of going back to the world. But then, when I saw how serious he was, and you can kind of see it in someone's face, you're like, okay, there's something different about him. He's doing the right thing. He's reading his Bible every day. He's praying. He's, clean. He's not drinking alcohol. He's doing all this stuff. So it was just amazing to see his transformation. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll give it a shot, because what I'm doing isn't really helping, you know what I mean? Because I was in and out of rehab for a long time, and it did nothing for me, So, so yeah, I went to that 2012 conference. I think it was Chosen. I think it was the name of the conference.
Oh,
it was
okay.
a global leadership conference that we have once a year.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
so you went to that, and then what happened? You had like a life-changing experience?
No. So, of course, that actually, I think what it did was plant a seed in me, but it still took another 3 years of just pain and stuff and suffering to really finally hit that rock bottom. I don't think at that time I hit the rock bottom,
Okay.
So, 2012, I go to the meeting, or the conference out in LA. It was incredible. I was like, I remember hearing all the songs. I was like, oh, these are the songs I grew up with, and seeing all the preachers, and it was definitely an incredible experience. And I felt, something. I was like, wow, this is awesome. But when I came back, I was still too entrenched in that world, and I didn't learn my lesson just yet. I still had a few lessons to learn.
Oh, okay.
It,
So was that church then started up here in Boston as well? Is that when Colton came out here?
Yeah, they came about 2 weeks after the conference, I believe.
Okay, that's when they started it. And did you start going then, or did you wait a while? Or
So I was at the first service, because the first service was actually in my parents' house.
Okay.
Because at the time there was only 16 people on the mission team, and there was a remnant group out in New Hampshire. So when they first came, they didn't really have a place to meet just yet. So they asked, "Hey, can we meet in your house?" Because my father, is pretty wealthy, has a nice, big size house. So they set that all up in a little church service, and I remember I filmed the church service, because I kind of, with my background with film and stuff, and it was great. But again, I still wasn't. I was just kind of coming around, kind of taking it slow. You know what I mean? Then I started to study the Bible, but every time I got up into to a certain point when I really had to make the decision, I kind of turned my back.
So you were really going through a struggle a lot. You wanted to change, but you had it was like you were in a battle. Part of you did and part of you didn't. And then what finally was the thing that caused you to totally surrender to Christ and repent and give it all up?
Yeah, so exactly what you were saying, it was definitely like just a pull. It was like, I want to go this way, but the drugs just keep bringing me back, And I think the big thing that started the whole thing was, I studied the Bible a bunch of times. I think it was like literally 8 to 9 different times. I started on the Bible studies to really get my foundations and stuff. And I just, every time it got to a certain point when I had to make the decision, it's just like, I can't do this. So after about 3 years of that, I remember I got clean off of everything for about a year. I stopped smoking cigarettes. I got on what is called Suboxone, which is like at the time I thought it was good. It's actually really bad for you because it's a drug that keeps you from using drugs, but it's a drug itself. So I don't recommend that at all. But at the time, it was helping me to kind of just get off of the drugs that I was on. And so I started to get clean kind of in that way. I was coming to church every once in a while and stuff like that, but I was kind of like, I'm just going to stay home. And I kind of sheltered myself and isolated myself, which is like the worst thing you can do, especially as an addict. My father used to tell me all the time, if you keep isolating yourself, you're going to go back. You need a support system. The church will really help you, but if it's not the church, then maybe AA meetings, maybe something, you need a support group that's going to help you. And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't believe I'm strong enough to kind of do it. But then, of course, that only lasts as long, and I fell back into the addiction world. I relapsed, and it was worse than ever at this time.
Really?
That's when it just got really bad. Finally, luckily, it only lasted like a few months, which is pretty, I think it's the grace of God that it only happened for a little bit. But finally, it was around about March, and, my mother knew something was up. My father knew something was up. They knew, I was not, for a while I was clean, and then I started to act really different and, started going out more and stuff. And they were like, okay, this is weird. And they finally asked me, and it got to a point that I just couldn't, hide it anymore. And, so they knew. So finally we went to the courts, and because at that time I was on probation for about 3 years. So when we went into the courts, they said, yeah, you have violated your probation. We're going to send you to jail. So I went to jail. Luckily, they decided, we see that he's hurting, we see that he's an addict. Let's put him in a rehab. So I went to a lockdown. I was in Billerica Corrections for one night. Sometimes it could take up to a week to a month to get a bed, but I got a bed in one day, which was amazing. Long story short, I went to this place called MATSI, Men's Addiction Treatment Center, and got in there. At first, I was like, man, this is rough, but I started to really, enjoy it in a sense of I felt free. I was like, wow, this is finally I can just kind of compose myself and get in the right mind and stuff. So I was there, and this is the big story that really made it happen. I'm in a room, so I'm in a facility of about 100. There's 112 beds. So there's 7 rooms. There's 4 units, and there's 7 rooms, and there's 4 beds in each room, which comes out to 112. So for a week you're in the detox facility, and then you move over to the other units, which is just the normal, kind of the rehab side of things when you start to kind of build your life and stuff. And I remember when I first got in there, I'm like, okay, I want a Bible. Does anybody have a Bible? And I started asking the staff. I said, I would love to start reading the Bible, because I always kind of found comfort in reading the Bible. Even growing up, when I would go to jail, I'd pray and stuff like that. I said, God, I'll never do this again. But of course, I went back to it. But finally, there was this urge. I was like, man, I need to start reading my Bible again. So I started asking, and they don't have a Bible because they can't have a Bible in a rehab facility unless they have every other religious text. So they have to basically, for everybody else, they can't just do Christians. It has to be for everyone.
Oh.
So they would have to have, you know, the Islam text and all that stuff. So I got really bummed out, and I was like, hey, can my parents bring a Bible? And they were like, no, they would have to bring all the religious texts.
Oh.
So I was like, okay, you know, so I started to talk to my dad and stuff, but I started praying and stuff like that. But at that point in time, I was either going to go into the army or become a disciple and follow Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really know what I was going to do. But finally, I get sent over to Unit 2 and Room 2 and Bed C. I'll never forget that. And I walk in there, and there's my bed. It was right on, you know, the left. And I get my clothes. I just got done, I think, doing laundry or something like that. And they gave me my my sheets to make my bed. And I started to make my bed and started to fold my clothes, you know, try to do things that seem normal and get my life kind of together, and even the littlest things, but folding clothes and stuff. And I remember opening up the drawer, and what do I see is a Bible.
Wow.
And right then and there, I was like, started to look around and be like, okay, is there someone putting the Bible there? What's going on here? But I really, right then, got to my hands and knees. I remember the people looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy? But I got on my hands and knees and started praying. And from then on, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to become a disciple, follow Jesus, and really give my life to it. Finally, I called this guy. It was Ted. And I call him, and he was like an elder, a shepherd of the church at the time. Because about this time now, it's about 3 years the church, so they're about 50 members at this time. And I say, hey, I want to study the Bible. What do I need to do? Finally, I get out. I meet with him. He makes me breakfast, and we have a great talk, and we have a little study on James, I think we did. And then called Colton, got with him. We started studying the Bible, and I just really, this time around, I just immersed myself. You know, I went to all the meetings. I really studied the scriptures and really studied them with a clear mind, you know, and it was like, man, wow, this is, and it started to impact me more than anything that I've ever done. And from there on, I remember I just, it was about three weeks, I think, or a month afterwards, and on May 3rd, after really studying the Bible, you know, getting open about everything, I was baptized on May 3rd, and it's been an incredible road so far, you know.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that even though it was a very long journey, that you finally, you know, gave your life to Christ and that you got delivered from all of it, and now you're following Him and doing His work.
Yeah.
And we only have like a couple of minutes. You might just want to say what you're doing now in the ministry, and then what are you currently doing now?
Absolutely. So I, just to make it quick, I started to, I got asked actually to be on full-time ministry, because I really saw that, you know, God gave me a lot of talents in music, in film, and different things, and I said to myself, I got to use these talents for God, you know, because before I used to use my talents for just other things, and I really wanted to give it to God. And a lot of people saw Colton, Mike, these guys saw just a talent, you know, for the ministry. So I said to myself, you know, at first I was like, man, I don't know what does this entail, but then I really started to see, you know, and I started to see the impact my testimony has had on other people, and and I got to bring and study the Bible with people and bring them to Christ, and I just saw the fulfillment in that, and the purpose. And right now I lead most of the worship with another guy, Tony Martin. We lead the worship service at our church as well, and I actually now, kind of putting it all full circle, I actually now lead the AMS ministry of our church, which my parents led, you know, 18 years ago.
Wow.
So it's pretty funny how it all kind of comes together and God works everything out. But it's been amazing. It's been humbling. It's been incredible experience. I'm still learning a lot, you know. There's always something to learn, but God has really got me through so much.
I'm so glad that He has, you know, because I know your parents, and please tell them I said hello.
I will.
And I'm so glad to see that, you know, that God is using you now to bring others to Christ, and you probably can have people that relate to what you've been through because they're either having problems. So if there's anybody out there that's having any type of problems with drugs or addictions, then you can contact Gianni through my email address, and I'm sure he'd love to talk with you and share with you the good news about how Jesus Christ can set you free from all of the drugs and any addiction that you might be going through. And the scripture that I wanted to share is just one verse, which I feel that will sum all this up, that says, with men it is an impossible, but not with God. For with God all things are possible.
Right.
And it might seem at the time like it was impossible, that you could have never, ever gotten out of that lifestyle of, how many years was it, the total of it?
From about 13 to about 21.
Okay, so that was a long time. You probably thought, oh, I'll never get out of this.
Right.
But with God, all things are possible. That's how truly powerful God is, that he can turn your life around from night to day. He can turn things around very quickly, and I'm so glad to hear that he did that for you, and that he can even do that for you out there that are watching on TV, that if you have any kind of problems at all, any addictions to anything at all, that Jesus Christ came not only to save us, but to set the captives free from whatever addiction, whatever bad habits you may have. That's what he's all about. He's our Savior, our Redeemer, our Lord, our King, our Master, and he can help you through anything it is that you're going through. He is a miracle-working God. And I just ask that if you have any problems, that you will turn to him and just call in the name of Christ, because he can heal you, he can save you, and he can deliver you. And if you have any questions, if you have any comments, or even if you have any prayer requests, don't hesitate to contact me at the email address that will be shown at the end. And, I just want to say once again, I appreciate you coming on the show. And it seems like the time just flew by. And maybe at another time you could come on and play an instrument. You said you play many instruments,
Yes,
right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, the next time you could come on and
I would love
play.
to. It'd
Okay.
be my pleasure.
Great.
Thank you
Well,
so much.
thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
So this is the day the Lord has made, and let us rejoice and be glad in it. It's all about Jesus, and I'll see you the next time. God bless you all.